There's another thing that we want to talk about for a moment, kind of another way to hit some of you out there who've come with some issues or some questions you have tonight. Maybe you're in a relationship that's gone on for a while and it's kind of stagnant. It's just not proceeding ahead, or it's feeling like it's not so new and fresh anymore. There are some symptoms that you might be able to look for, and they're written down there. They're very behavioral, and they're there if you look for them, and they're real detectable because you don't have to jump into your head. You can actually see them out there in your behaviors with one another. One of the things you might notice is decreased play behavior. Decreased playing back and forth. Playing in general is very, very important. However it is you choose to play. Whatever is fun for you, playful for you, it's important to make sure you do that all of your lives. Equating play behavior with being silly or being immature is deadly stuff. It's just deadly. We just kind of shrivel up if we don't continue to play. But in our relationships with people, a lot of times we stop playing. Another thing that happens, we see a decrease in spontaneous events. A decrease in those real fun, spontaneous things like, I know it's midnight, we're already in bed, but let's get up and go get ice cream. You know, those sorts of feelings? Only 3 people tonight are probably going out and getting ice cream. Those 3 people who identified themselves initially as freshly in love, like they're getting ice cream at midnight. What are we all doing? We're asleep. It's even worse. You know, we're actually asleep at midnight. They're out having fun. So it's a decrease in those sorts of spontaneous events, and it's sad because it just doesn't feel like it's a fresh, refreshing relationship. And it's because it isn't, because we're not doing things that would characterize fresh relationships in our lives. Another thing we see is a decrease in the words we use as we communicate with one another. You see these real short, one-word sentences. Where are my socks? In the dryer. What are we having for dinner? Macaroni. Where are you going? To the store. Does that sound familiar? We stop talking the way people who are freshly in love talk. Where are you going, dear? Well, I'll just be out for a few moments because I'm going to the store, but I'll be back. That's how people who are kind of fresh, that's how those 3 people are communicating. The rest of us, I don't know. We're probably using those short, choppy sentences. Well, what happens, and it's kind of ironic, a lot of us are going, yes, I relate, yes, it's my life. It's my life too, by the way. We can all identify. We're all very similar. Well, the sad thing is that as we take on these symptoms, and we behave less and less like people who are in love, then those thoughts and feelings start to match the way we're behaving. We start to feel like we're not in love. To reverse that, if we're going to reverse that, on the next page there are a couple things about prescriptions there. These prescriptions are all very positive. Here's what we're going to work for. The first thing that you do before you do anything else is you check your communication components, just to remind yourself of the essence of communication. I've already mentioned that most relationship problems have to do with a breakdown in communication. So you check that out. But beyond that, if you have a nice system set up for expressing yourselves, a vehicle for that, to express yourselves to one another, then proceed ahead and replace those symptoms on the previous page with some of these prescriptions here. These prescriptions are ways to put positives back into your relationship. Here's what happens. I said that as we have that decrease in spontaneous events and such, then we start to feel as if we're not in love or that we have a stagnant relationship. Well, a lot of times we sit around and wait for those feelings to change before we're going to behave as if we're in love again. That doesn't work. The best example I can possibly think of, because I think all of us relate to this, is when you're depressed or when you're sad. You know how when you're depressed, you go home and you sit and you don't get dressed up and you won't do anything and you don't feel like going out and you say to yourself, I'm not going to go out until I feel better. Does that work? It doesn't work. What we have to do is to get up and go out and behave as if we're not depressed, and then what happens? You get undepressed. The feeling comes after the behavior. Sometimes we get this mixed up in reverse. It's the same thing with a stagnant relationship, I promise. We have to start behaving as if it's not stagnant before the feeling comes. And then once we behave as if it's not stagnant, by putting spontaneous events back into our lives, by scheduling real fun activities we stopped doing, by making sure that we emphasize and call attention to the positives in our partner's attributes, those things then make us feel like that relationship is revitalized. One of the guidelines down there that's real fun to do, if you ever want to try it with your partner, you want to kind of just, it's playful too, because it's real fun and it's silly and you get embarrassed and you laugh real hard. Just make yourself do this. Pretend like you're introducing your partner to an audience. Pretend like you're saying, this is my partner, and she is the most wonderful, virtuous, beautiful. You just go on and think of all the adjectives you can and pile them up on one another. You'll have a lovely time, and it will also remind you of the reason why you fell in love with that person to begin with. All those things down there, they're all the positives to put back into your relationship. The best way we know to revitalize it is to behave as if it is already revitalized.